You think you're so good, so perfect. Let's see how you feel when they drag her screaming from your arms." That's what she said. My sister. My own flesh and blood, Jessica. She looked me dead in the eye, her voice dripping with poison, right before she ripped my world apart. I replay those words sometimes late at night when the quiet is too loud and the memories are too sharp. They were a promise, a threat delivered with chilling precision. A threat I was too naive, too trusting to believe would ever come true. My life before all this, it was simple. Beautifully, achingly simple. I was Sarah, a single mom living in a quiet little town where everyone knew everyone, or at least knew their car. My whole world revolved around Lily, my sweet, sunny 4-year-old girl with hair like spun gold and eyes that sparkled like the summer sky. We had our routines, our little rituals, pancakes on Saturday mornings, story time, snuggled up on the couch, chasing fireflies in the backyard twilight. We weren't rich, not by a long shot. I worked 2 jobs cleaning houses and waiting tables just to keep our heads above water. But we had love. So much love, it felt like it could fill the whole damn house. Lily was my purpose, my light, my everything. Jessica, well, she was family. Older sister always a bit restless, always wanting more than she had. There had always been a subtle tension between us, a faint undercurrent of something I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the life she felt she should have had, or maybe just the fact that I seemed content with my little simple world while she chased after bigger, shinier things that always seemed to slip through her fingers. She'd borrowed money from me before small amounts I could spare, which she was slow to repay if she ever did. But she was my sister. Family. You help family, right? Then came the day. The day that cleaved my life into before and after. I was just getting Lily settled for her afternoon nap when there was a knock at the door. Not the usual friendly knock of a neighbor, but firm official. 2 people stood on my porch looking far too serious for a Tuesday afternoon. They introduced themselves. Child Protective Services, CPS. My first reaction was pure confusion. Is there a problem? I stammered, my heart starting a slow, heavy drumbeat in my chest. They were polite professional, but their eyes held that flat, assessing look that instantly makes you feel exposed. They asked to come in, and I let them, my mind racing. Had one of Lily's friends gotten hurt at the park? Had someone reported a missed vaccination, though I knew I was up to date? Then they told me. The words felt unreal, like something from a nightmare someone else was having. "We've received a report," the woman said. Her voice measured alleging child abuse. Abuse. My breath hitched. Abuse Lily. It was impossible, laughable, monstrous. That's not possible, I said, shaking my head. There must be a mistake. Lily is my life. I would never, ever hurt her. Who reported this? They hesitated. "We can't disclose the source of the report at this time," the man said, "but the allegations are serious." Serious. It was a lie, a malicious, sickening lie. My mind scrambled, trying to grasp who would do such a thing. A disgruntled neighbor, someone who didn't like me, but no one didn't like me. I kept to myself, focused on Lily. Who? Then the woman added, almost as an afterthought, "We understand the report came from a family member." A family member. The world tilted. My blood ran cold. There was only one family member close enough, one who knew our lives, one who... Jessica. It hit me with the force of a physical blow. It had to be her. The subtle jealousy, the veiled comments about my struggles, the money she owed me. But this, to make up something so vile, to accuse me of hurting Lily. Why? Why would she do this? My shock turned to horror. "No," I whispered. "No, it wasn't her. She wouldn't." But even as I said the words, a sickening certainty bloomed in my gut, that look in her eyes, that cruel promise. She meant it. They wanted to talk to Lily, my precious girl who was just waking up, rubbing her eyes. I felt a protective fury rise in me. How dare they? How dare anyone put her through this based on a lie? But they were the authorities. They had the power. I tried to cooperate. I really did. I showed them around the house spotlessly clean. I showed them Lily's room filled with toys and books. I answered their questions, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay calm. I talked about Lily's pediatrician, her daycare teachers, anyone who could attest to her health, her happiness, her safety with me. This was a misunderstanding, I told myself. It had to be. Once they talked to Lily, they would see the truth. They would see this was a monstrous lie. But their questions, they were probing, invasive. They asked about discipline, about accidents, about scratches or bruises. They asked about my stress levels, my finances. Every honest answer felt twisted, scrutinized. My poverty wasn't a struggle I managed. It felt like they were painting it as neglect. My exhaustion from working 2 jobs wasn't dedication. It felt like they saw it as a sign I couldn't cope. I saw the suspicion in their eyes. My small house suddenly felt like a cage. Every toy Lily had, every drawing on the fridge felt like potential evidence. People I'd known my whole life, the neighbors who saw Lily and me every day, suddenly looked at me differently. Whispers felt like shouts. I was no longer Sarah, the nice single mom. I was Sarah, the subject of a CPS investigation. And through it all, the sickening knowledge that my own sister was behind it. I called her shaking, demanding to know how she could do this. She played innocent, at first feigned concern, but then the mask slipped. Just for a second. Enough for me to hear the cold calculation in her voice. She needed money. A lot of it. And something about this accusation, it was tied to that. I didn't fully understand the angle. Then maybe custody for financial gain? Maybe something more complex and twisted, but the motive, however vague at that moment, was undeniably tied to her desperate need for cash, and she was willing to use Lily to use me to get it. That first day ended in a blur of fear and disbelief. They left telling me they would be in touch. They didn't take Lily that day, and for a brief, foolish moment I clung to that as hope. But the air in my house felt different, tainted. My beautiful, simple life was shattered. Pieces lay all around me, sharp and dangerous, and looming over everything was the terrifying possibility that they might actually believe the lie, that they might take my daughter. The days that followed blurred into a nightmare loop. Every phone call, every knock at the door sent a jolt of ice through my veins. CPS escalated. They weren't just asking questions anymore, they were investigating. Thoroughly. Intrusively. They interviewed Lily again, this time alone. The thought of my little girl being questioned by strangers without me there to comfort her twisted my stomach. I knew she was confused, scared. How could she possibly understand why these people were asking if Mommy ever hurt her? I poured all my energy, all my dwindling hope into cooperating. I gathered every piece of evidence I could think of. Letters from Lily's teachers praising her development and my involvement. Notes from her pediatrician confirming she was healthy and thriving. Character references from friends, neighbors, even the manager at one of my jobs, all attesting to what a devoted, loving mother I was. I handed them over, hoping they would see the truth, the overwhelming evidence of a happy, safe child. But the system, it felt less like a process seeking truth and more like a machine processing cases. You weren't a person, you were a file number. Your life wasn't a complex tapestry of love and struggle. It was a checklist of potential risks. Every interaction felt impersonal, sterile. My carefully gathered references seemed to disappear into the void. My heartfelt explanations felt like they hit a wall of professional skepticism. They seemed more focused on the possibility of abuse than the mountain of evidence proving its impossibility. My fear morphed into a suffocating sense of powerlessness. I was trapped in a bureaucratic labyrinth fighting an invisible enemy, a false accusation weaponized by someone who knew exactly where to strike. It didn't matter how loudly I proclaimed my innocence, how much proof I offered. The accusation itself had a weight, a momentum that seemed unstoppable. Then came the phone call that ripped the floor out from under me. CPS had made a decision. Based on the report and their investigation, they determined there was sufficient concern to warrant immediate action. They were temporarily removing Lily from my care. Temporarily. The word felt like a cruel joke. They were taking her, right now. The world went silent. My heart didn't just drum, it shattered into a million pieces inside my chest. No, no. This couldn't be happening. They arrived a few hours later, quiet, efficient, like grief counselors, attending a wake, except they were the ones bringing the death. Lily was confused. She saw their serious faces, saw my own face pale and streaked with tears I couldn't hold back. "Mommy, what's happening?" She asked, her little voice trembling. I knelt down, trying to hold her close, trying to memorize the feel of her small body in my arms. "It's okay, baby." I choked out the lie, tasting like ash. "Mommy, these nice people are going to help you visit somewhere for a little while. Like an adventure." She didn't buy it. Children are smarter than we think. She saw the fear in my eyes, felt the tension in my embrace. As the woman gently, firmly took her hand, Lily started to cry, a raw, terrified sound that tore through my soul. "Mommy, no, I want to stay with Mommy!" She screamed, reaching for me. I wanted to snatch her back, barricade the door scream until my throat was raw. But I was frozen, helpless. The man stood between me and the door, a silent, impassive guard. I watched my heart being ripped from my body as my daughter, my light, my everything was led away, her cries echoing in the suddenly empty house. That moment, watching them take her, it was the worst pain I had ever known. A physical ache that settled deep in my bones and has never truly left. My home, which had been filled with her laughter and warmth, was now just a hollow shell. Every one of her toys, every tiny sock left on the floor was a brutal reminder of what had been stolen. I was alone, stripped bare. My daughter was in foster care, a stranger's home, because my sister had lied. And the system, the one I had trusted to see the truth, had taken her. My efforts to prove my innocence through official channels had failed. The bureaucracy, the process, the sheer weight of the false accusation, it had won. I was facing a legal battle I couldn't afford with the deck stacked against me. Lily was gone, and I was losing. The next few months were a blur of crushing despair. Every legal document felt like a fresh stab wound. Every conversation with my lawyer was a reminder of the uphill battle. The lack of concrete evidence against me wasn't enough. I had to actively disprove a phantom. The financial strain was immense. Paying legal fees while still trying to keep the lights on meant even less food, even less sleep. But nothing compared to the agonizing, soul-deep ache of missing Lily. The silence in the house was deafening. I saw her face everywhere. In the park, where we used to play in the grocery store aisle with the cereal she loved, in the empty space beside me in bed. The court hearing was scheduled, a closed hearing. No public access, no transparency. Just me, my lawyer, the CPS representatives, my sister. Oh God, seeing her face again and the judge. It felt fittingly isolating, like the system wanted to handle its dirty work in secret, away from any prying eyes that might see the injustice. I tried to cling to hope. My lawyer was good. He had the references, the medical records, the proof of a safe home. Surely, when presented with the facts in a courtroom, the judge would see through the flimsy, malicious lie. This was my chance, my one shot within the system to get Lily back. The day of the hearing arrived gray and cold, mirroring the dread in my heart. The courtroom was small, sterile. Seeing Jessica sitting there looking calm, almost smug, while I was trembling with nerves and grief was a physical effort. She testified, her voice modulated, weaving her lies with practiced ease. Listening to her calmly fabricate stories about my supposed failures, twisting innocent events into sinister accusations, was a torment I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. It was like watching someone rewrite my life with venom. My lawyer did his best. He cross-examined her, pointing out inconsistencies, highlighting the lack of any actual evidence of harm. He presented my case, highlighting my love for Lily, my efforts to provide for her the testimony of those who knew us. I spoke my voice thick with emotion, pleading with the judge to see the truth, to understand that Lily was my entire world. We waited. The air was thick with tension. Every second stretched into an eternity. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment of truth. The judge spoke. His voice was calm, professional. He summarized the case, the arguments, and then he delivered the ruling. He found the allegations to be credible. He ruled that returning Lily to my care at this time would not be in her best interest. Custody was awarded, not permanently to Jessica, not yet, but he upheld the state's decision to keep Lily in foster care, moving towards termination of my parental rights if circumstances didn't change. The world went silent again. The floor gave way. I stared at the judge, trying to process the words, but they wouldn't make sense. Credible. Not in her best interest, he believed her. He believed the lies. A wave of pure, annihilating pain washed over me. My breath left my lungs in a ragged gasp. No, this wasn't real. This couldn't be real. I don't remember standing up. I barely remember leaving the courtroom. My lawyer was talking his words muffled and distant. All I could hear was the echo of the judge's voice, the confirmation that the system had utterly, completely failed me. It hadn't just believed the lie, it had sanctioned it. It had taken my daughter and put its stamp of approval on her being gone. I stumbled out into the gray afternoon, the cold air doing nothing to wake me from the nightmare. The system, the police, CPS, the courts, they were supposed to protect the innocent, to find the truth, but they hadn't. They had been manipulated, blinded, or maybe they just didn't care enough to look hard enough. They had taken my child based on a lie and called it justice. I collapsed. Not physically, not completely, but internally. All hope drained away, leaving a vast empty void where my heart used to be. I had played by the rules. I had cooperated. I had trusted the process. And it had betrayed me. Royally. Completely. I spent the next few days in that void, a zombie in my silent house. Grief was a suffocating blanket. Despair was a physical weight pressing down on me. There was no path forward. The legal system had closed its door on me. Lily was gone. What was the point? I sat in Lily's room, surrounded by her things, her scent faintly clinging to a stuffed animal, and the raw, primal agony was almost unbearable. Tears streamed down my face, silent, endless. I was broken, utterly, irrevocably broken. But then something shifted. Slowly, painfully. The tears didn't stop, but beneath the raw grief, a flicker ignited. Small, but fierce, like a dying ember catching a tiny breath of air. It was anger. Cold, hard, vengeful anger. Jessica. She had done this. My sister. She had betrayed me in the most fundamental, sickening way possible. She had weaponized the deepest love I knew, twisted it into something vile, and used it to steal my child. And the system had been her unwitting accomplice. The anger grew, fueling itself on the despair. It wasn't a hot, wild rage, but a cold, calculating fury, a clarity born of absolute loss. They took her, my daughter. The system failed me. It proved it wouldn't protect me, wouldn't help me. A new thought, chillingly rational, formed in the wreckage of my mind. If the system won't give me justice, I will find it myself. If they won't help me get Lily back within the law, I will fight outside it. The victim died that day in the courtroom. The broken mother, drowning in despair, started to fade. In her place, something else began to stir. Something harder, colder, focused. I looked around Lily's empty room, the silence no longer just sorrowful, but sharp with purpose. They had taken everything from me. Everything. And when you have nothing left to lose, you are capable of anything. My fight wasn't over. It had just moved into the shadows. The transition from utter despair to grim determination wasn't instantaneous, but it felt like a switch had been flipped somewhere deep inside me. The first few weeks after the court ruling were the lowest I've ever been. I barely ate, barely slept, just existed in the hollow echo of my home. But slowly, agonizingly, that cold spark of anger began to burn brighter than the surrounding darkness. I started small. Research, not legal research this time. Research into other things, things I never thought I'd need to know. Surveillance, information gathering. How do people find things out when no one is telling them the truth? How do you prove something when the official channels refuse to look? My laptop became my constant companion. I spent hours poring over articles, forums, even online tutorials that felt illicit just reading them. I learned about types of listening devices, tiny cameras, GPS trackers. I learned about digital footprints and how to erase them, about secure communication apps, about people who operate in the gray areas, the ones who find information or get things done outside the bright, blinding light of the law. This path, it felt dangerous, wrong even. Everything in me screamed that this wasn't how things were supposed to work. You were supposed to trust the police, trust the courts. But they had shown me, brutally, that their trust was misplaced. They had left me with no other option. My daughter was gone. My sister had lied, stolen her away, and gotten away with it through the system's blind spot. My only moral compass now pointed towards Lily. Whatever it took to get her back, that was the right thing to do, even if it meant doing things that were legally questionable, ethically murky. My love for Lily was the justification. The injustice I'd suffered was the fuel. The most difficult part of the research phase was realizing I couldn't do it all myself. I was a single mom working 2 jobs, living openly in a small town. Trying to spy on my sister, who now probably felt untouchable, was too risky. I needed help, professional help, someone who knew how to move unseen, how to gather information without getting caught, someone who operated in those shadows I'd been reading about. Finding the right person was like navigating a minefield. How did you even find someone like that? It wasn't like there was a directory. It involved more research, more wading into less reputable corners of the internet, asking questions, indirectly vetting potential contacts with extreme caution. I met with a couple of people who felt wrong, either too slick, too demanding, or just plain creepy. The risk wasn't just getting caught. It was trusting someone with my desperate situation, someone who could just as easily rip me off or expose me. Then I found Jay. Not his real name, obviously. He was recommended through a very, very discreet channel I stumbled upon. Our first meeting was in a neutral, forgettable place miles away from our town. He wasn't what I expected. Not a tough guy, but quiet, observant. He listened patiently as I, with trembling hands and a voice tight with emotion, laid out my story. The false accusation, Jessica's betrayal, the court, ruling Lily being taken. He didn't offer sympathy. He offered pragmatism. He asked questions about Jessica, her habits, her associates, her financial situation, which it turned out was even more dire than I'd realized, the potential key to her motive. He talked about methods, risks, costs. He was professional, detached, but there was a competence about him that inspired a fragile trust. He understood the goal: gather undeniable evidence of Jessica's deception, specifically about the false report, and her motive in a way that could later be used. Hiring him felt like stepping off a cliff. It was expensive, requiring me to liquidate what little savings I had left and take on debt I couldn't imagine paying back. It was terrifying, placing my fate and Lily's in the hands of a stranger operating outside the law. But looking at his calm, steady gaze and thinking of Lily's tear-streaked face being carried away, I knew I had no other choice. This was my new path. We made a plan. Meticulous. Discreet. He would need access to Jessica's life, get close enough to listen to watch. It was risky for him and risky for me. If he was discovered, everything could unravel, and I could face serious consequences myself. The tension during this planning phase was immense. Every decision felt heavy, weighted with the potential for disaster. Getting the surveillance equipment, tiny microphones, pinhole cameras, felt like handling stolen goods even though I'd paid for them. Just having them in my possession felt illegal, like I was already a criminal. Finally, the planning was complete. Jay was in position, ready to execute the infiltration. The secret mission was about to begin. Tension coiled tight in my gut. The uncertainty was agonizing. Would he succeed? Would he be discovered? Would the evidence even be there? Or had I risked everything, my money, my freedom, my last chance, on a desperate gamble? The plan was in motion. The outcome was utterly uncertain. The infiltration phase was a masterclass in slow burn tension. Jay, it turned out, was incredibly good at what he did. He managed to insert himself into Jessica's orbit in a way that seemed utterly natural, leveraging a connection through a mutual acquaintance, appearing as a helpful, unassuming person who was just around. He didn't move in, but became a frequent visitor, offering small favors, blending into the background. And as he integrated, the information started to trickle in. Not through thrilling car chases or dramatic break-ins, but through mundane recordings, quiet snippets of conversation captured by devices so small I could hold them on the tip of my finger. Receiving those files felt surreal. I would sit alone in my silent house laptop, open headphones on, listening to my sister's voice, hearing her laugh, hearing her complain about work, hearing her talk about mutual friends, and then hearing her talk about me and about Lily. It started with hints, veiled comments to people she seemed to trust, complaining about how hard things were financially, how she needed a break, how things would be so much easier if I wasn't around. Easier if she had access to something she needed. Then the conversations got more direct. I remember the first time I heard her explicitly discuss the report. My stomach clenched so tight I felt sick. She was talking to someone I didn't recognize, someone who seemed to know at least part of what she'd done. Yeah, I told them she wasn't fit. Jessica said, her voice casual, dismissive. Honestly, the way she was living, struggling like that, it's better for Lily, really. And hey, her voice lowered conspiratorially. This way, maybe I can finally get my hands on, well, you know. My hands trembled as I listened. You know, it had to be about money. Something tied to Lily, maybe a potential inheritance, a trust fund I didn't even know about, or perhaps some kind of state assistance she could access if she had custody. The exact financial mechanism was still unclear, but her motive was laid bare. It was about greed. She had sold her sister, her niece, for money. Hearing her say it so calmly, so callously, was a pain unlike the initial shock. This wasn't just an accusation. It was a cold, calculated transaction. My grief turned to a searing, righteous fury. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was pure, unadulterated malice. Jay provided not just audio, but sometimes video. Carefully placed cameras capturing interactions, documents left lying around. It was a slow, painstaking process. Days would go by with nothing useful, just the tedious reality of my sister's life. And then a breakthrough. A conversation where she outlined her plan in more detail, boasting about how she'd manipulated the CPS worker, how she'd played on their biases, how she'd exaggerated minor incidents into proof of abuse. It was easy, I heard her say once, a chilling giggle following the words. You just tell them what they want to hear, mention unstable environment and lack of resources, hint at things they can't see. They do the rest. My blood ran cold. She hadn't just lied. She had studied the system, figured out its weaknesses, and exploited them to steal my child. She was a monster disguised in the familiar face of my sister. The evidence piled up. Hours of audio snippets, of video photos, of documents, like emails discussing her financial woes and her desperate need for cash around the time of the report. It wasn't just her confession. It was context motive, proof of intent. Jay was building an undeniable case piece by painstaking piece. The tension during this phase was constant. Every time Jay went near her house, every time he planted or retrieved a device, I was a nervous wreck. What if he was caught? What if she found something? What if the recordings weren't clear enough? What if after all this, the evidence still wasn't enough to fight the system that had already ruled against me? Emotionally, it was a roller coaster. Hearing Jessica's voice, sometimes sounding so normal, sometimes so calculating, was a constant source of pain and rage. I saw her going about her life free while my daughter was in foster care, and I was living in limbo. It fueled my resolve, hardening the cold anger into an unbreakable determination. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it for justice. For Lily. Finally, after weeks that felt like years, Jay delivered the final package. A secure hard drive containing everything. A damning collection of her own words, damning her own actions. proof of the lie, proof of the motive, proof of her manipulation of the system. I had everything I needed. The reckoning was about to begin. Armed with the undeniable truth, my focus shifted from gathering evidence to deploying it. This was the most crucial step. The legal system had failed me once. Simply submitting this evidence to the same court might result in it being dismissed, buried, or deemed inadmissible for being obtained illegally. I needed a different approach. I needed to hit Jessica where she was vulnerable, and I needed to force the system to pay attention. I needed public pressure, media, journalism. That was the platform. A viral story, a public outcry, something that would make it impossible for the authorities to ignore the truth, regardless of how it was uncovered. I meticulously planned the leak. Anonymity was key, at least initially. I couldn't risk revealing my hand too early. It wasn't about clearing my name publicly first. It was about exposing Jessica and forcing the authorities to reopen the case based on overwhelming new evidence. I researched journalists, specifically investigative reporters known for tackling difficult stories about systemic failures or injustices. I compiled a package, not just the raw audio, video, which might be dismissed, but transcribed key conversations, summarized the timeline, presented the financial motive, with supporting hints from the documents Jay found. I packaged it all clearly anonymously and sent it to multiple reputable sources simultaneously. A single leak could be contained. Multiple leaks increased the chance of it exploding into public view. The days after sending the package were a different kind of hell, waiting, anticipating. The tension was unbearable. Would anyone pick it up? Would they dismiss it? Would Jessica find out before the story broke? Every news report, every online article I scanned frantically, my heart in my throat. And then it happened. A local news outlet ran a story. Not the full depth yet, but a teaser. Shocking allegations of falsified CPS reports, rocked by explosive new evidence. Then another, and another. The key recordings started to surface online snippets, shared, retweeted, going viral. Jessica's voice, her casual confession of manipulating the system, was heard by thousands, then millions. The scandal erupted like a wildfire. News vans appeared in our quiet town. Neighbors who had looked at me with suspicion were now looking at Jessica with horror. The local paper ran headlines about betrayal and stolen innocence. The online comment sections were a furious mob condemning Jessica, demanding action, demanding that Lily be returned to me. The public outcry was immense. It was validating, yes, but also overwhelming. My private agony was suddenly a public spectacle. But it worked. The pressure was undeniable. CPS announced they were reviewing the case in light of the significant new information. The police opened an investigation. Not into me, but into Jessica for filing a false report, and potentially other charges related to her motive, which turned out to involve a complex scheme related to guardianship and accessing a relative's funds meant for Lily's future. I didn't see Jessica during this time, but I heard things, that her life was unraveling, that people were confronting her, shunning her, that the police were questioning her. The consequences for her were swift and severe, a public shaming followed by legal repercussions that were the direct result of her own words, her own lies brought to light from the shadows I'd operated in. The full legal resolution took time, as these things always do. There were more interviews, more reviews, but this time the evidence was on my side, undeniable, irrefutable. The false accusation was officially overturned. The court acknowledged the deception, and the process to return Lily to my custody began. This was the hardest weight of all, knowing it was finally happening but not having her yet. Every day felt like an eternity, but this time the agonizing weight was filled with a fragile, growing hope instead of despair. Finally, the day came. It wasn't a dramatic courtroom reunion, it was quiet. At the Foster family's home. I walked in my legs, trembling, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. And there she was, my Lily. A little taller, maybe a little quieter than I remembered, but her hair was still spun gold. Her eyes still held that spark, though they looked a little wary. She saw me. Her eyes widened, and then she ran. She ran into my arms, burying her face in my neck, clinging to me as if she would never let go. I held her tight, sobbing, burying my face in her sweet-smelling hair. "Mommy's here, baby," I whispered over and over. "Mommy's here. I'm never letting you go again." The months that followed were about healing, for both of us. Lily had been through trauma, separated from me, confused and scared. I had been through my own hell. The scars were deep. The innocence I'd once had, the simple trust in the way things were supposed to work, was gone forever. I knew the darkness people were capable of, knew the flaws in the systems meant to protect us. But Lily was home. Our life wasn't perfectly simple anymore. There were appointments, therapy sessions, quiet moments where Lily might get scared and need extra reassurance. There were the lingering questions about Jessica, her fate sealed by her own actions. There were the memories of the fear, the loss, the cold resolve that had driven me. But there was also the laughter returning to the house, the warmth of Lily curled up beside me, the joy of tucking her in at night. I had fought through the system around the system against my own sister, and I had won the only battle that mattered. I had my daughter back. I look at her now, playing in the backyard, her face lit up by the sun. The journey changed me. I'm not the same person who answered that door 2 years ago. I carry the weight of what I had to do, the morally gray path I walked. But I also carry the fierce pride of a mother who refused to give up, who found strength she never knew she had, and who brought her child home against impossible odds. Justice wasn't delivered neatly through official channels. It was fought for secretly, dangerously, born out of pain and desperation. It left scars, but it brought her back to me. And that, in the end, was the only thing that mattered. She's safe. She's home. We are together. And after everything, that quiet peace feels like the greatest victory of all. How do you find today's story? Leave a comment below. If you like this video, please like and share. Especially, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our interesting and exciting stories.